Hi, welcome to Spirit in the Shed, your one-stop shop for scriptural sensibility. I'm your host, Chris.
And I'm Marcy. We're so glad you're with us tonight. We left off last time with Abram and Lot separating and going their own ways. Lot got the lush valleys down near Sodom and Gomorrah, just hanging out. And Abram got the mountains, am I right?
You got mountainous ranges and a desertous range, and this place wouldn't seem like it'd be great to live in at all. Like, it's not an area you or I want to live in.
Right, but there's this one thing that I just noticed, and it says, after Lot had gone, the Lord said to Abram, and he gave him a promise. And just tonight, I think it's interesting that it was after Lot had gone that he gave him the promise. He couldn't be hanging out with Lot and get this exact promise. He had to be willing to separate. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
And it's even more interesting because tonight we're going to talk about chapters 14 and 15. And in chapter 14...
Chapter 14 is probably my most... This episode is probably going to be my favorite episode. It's action and thrill and the chase and the hunt.
It's John Clancy in the Bible.
Chapter 14 starts off with in the middle of a war zone. You got these, so just to set it up here, there is a main king that's in control of these other kings within this area of Mesopotamia at the time. And this main king is named Curdled
Cheese.
King
K is what we'll call him.
King K is what we'll call him.
Look it up. It's in the first couple of verses. You'll know why we're having trouble.
And he is in charge of these other kings, and he's been in charge for quite some time, and the other kings are there under him. Some of them are like, we don't like your rule anymore, and they decide to have a civil war, almost. So there's like 4 kings, I believe. Yeah, it's 4 kings against 5 kings. So the 5 kings are on King K's side, and the 4 kings are against him. And that's the setup for this. So we're being thrust right into the middle of the conflict right here.
And this is like, we're talking like a 13-year war. We're not talking about something that was started and done in a year or 2.
No. This took a long time, and we're just actually getting towards the end of it here, actually. You know what? I would have loved to hear a lot about this war.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would love to hear how it started, you know? Like, I want the story in this story.
I got you. So, in the 13th year, let's see, for 12 years they'd been subject to King K, but in the 13th year they rebelled against him. 1 year later, King K and his allies arrived and defeated the Rephaites at Ashtaroth. Okay? He defeated a bunch of people in all of this war. Like, he seemed to defeat everybody he came across.
Mm-hmm.
But he came across Lot. And he took Lot captive, right?
Well, he had to. So Sodom was one of the rebellious kings against King K here. And you had, and Lot was just in that area at the time, so he was just taking Lot captive because he was part of that place.
Right.
And that's where Abram actually gets thrust into the picture here.
So Abram heard his nephew had been captured. So he mobilized. You know, when you find out that somebody you love is in trouble, what do? You mobilize the troops. But here's the thing. Chris has already told you all the people that are on King K's side. Like, there's 5 other armies on his side, plus his army.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 6 armies. Now, Abram is going to save the day.
It's only 5 armies.
5 armies.
That does include King K's army.
Okay. So, Abram is mobilizing the troops. All 318 of them. 318 trained soldiers are going to go up against 5
It's
armies.
like 300 before 300.
It is like 300 before 300. So he mobilized the 318 men who had been born into his household. And they went, and they had one purpose in Abram's mind. It wasn't to free everybody and conquer anybody. It was to save Lot. That's all Abram had on his mind at that moment.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read this little passage here. Then he pursued King Kay's army. All right? He pursued King Kay's army. And this is what I want to tell you listening right now. There is not a thing that's going to keep God from pursuing whatever is causing you trouble. If the devil is wreaking havoc in your life right now, I promise that God is not going to sit back and wait till he's in a convenient spot. He will pursue the devil. He will pursue your anguish. He will pursue whatever it is that's causing you trouble and holding you captive. He will pursue it and he will defeat it. So, he pursues King Kay's army until he catches up with them at Dan. There he divided his men and attacked during the night. King Kay's army fled, but Abram chased them down as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. Abram recovered all the goods that had been taken, and he brought back his nephew Lot with all his possessions and all the women and other captives.
What I'm finding amazing about all of this is that you're seeing this theme throughout the entire Bible where there are like unsurmountable odds and dire circumstances, and there's no hope of anything happening that would prevent it from not being that way.
Right.
For lack of a better phrase.
It's a hopeless situation.
It's a hopeless situation. And what I found is that it's like God is making a point here.
Mm-hmm.
That when he does rescue them, the only person that can get credit for that is God himself.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's good stuff. And it's a situation where nobody can look back and say, oh yeah, 318. Well, if they were big enough, they could conquer an army of, how many do you think? What was a typical army back then?
I wouldn't even know. That'd be like
5 armies. 5 armies. That blows my mind. That he created a situation where he could take 318 men and conquer these 5 armies with them. So he, let's see, he brought back his nephew Lot with his possessions and all the women and other captives. So lots of people benefited from what Abram went to do for Lot.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those people was Melchizedek. Am I right?
Melchizedek was one of the kings of Salem, which in Hebrew means the king of peace. And there's a lot of theories going around out here that this King Melchizedek, who is the king of Salem, which means peace, is actually Jesus before he became Jesus.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
And I'm not. There's those theories. They don't quite hold enough water for me to believe them, and you can believe them if you want. And to be honest, it's really compelling, and I really like that theory. But it is. I think what more than anything else is driving a point. Even if he isn't Jesus before he was Jesus, this is demonstrating who Messiah will be.
Right.
He will be a king, and he will be a priest, because at this time Melchizedek was a priest, but he was also a king. And at this time, kings could not be priests, and priests could not be kings.
But he was.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting.
And that's where the theory really comes about, is that standard.
And I'll tell you what I find really interesting is, you even said it was a hopeless situation. And this week is the week of hope in Advent. And that's really awesome that you brought up how God can take a hopeless situation and infuse hope into it. And I think that's really awesome. But Melchizedek blessed Abram with a blessing after they brought Abram some bread and wine. They blessed him. And this is the blessing. Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has defeated your enemies for you. So he's blessing Abram for being a participant, but he's blessing God because he knows without a doubt that those enemies were defeated by God. Just like you said.
It's the only way. It's the only thing conclusion you can come up to. But of course, there's always going to be skepticism in all of this as well.
Right.
You're always going to have skeptics in your midst.
Sure.
But I feel like it's still really just like incredible that happened.
It really is. Now the king of Sodom wanted to jump in and give him all of these things, but Abram said, said to Abram, "Give back my people who were captured, but you can keep for yourself all the goods you have recovered." But Abram replied to the king of Sodom, "I solemnly swear to the Lord, the God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take so much as a single thread or sandal thong from what belongs to you. Otherwise, you might say I'm the one who made Abram rich." Abram wanted to make sure that through the ages, only God could get credit for taking care of Abram. And so he went and he turned down all of these riches that this king wanted to give him, and he said, no. I want to make sure that people know that God is who I serve and God is who takes care of me. And so he turned down everything, didn't he?
Yeah, he turned down all of it, and it's amazing how much the king of Sodom actually offered him, because he offered him everything. Just just let me have my people. You can have literally everything else.
Right.
That includes the city that he was running, the whole kingdom.
And
everything.
what he accepted was only what his young warriors had already eaten, and he requested that he gave a fair share of the goods to his allies. So he let the allies that fought with him have the rewards that the king of Sodom was trying to give to him. Now, here's the cool thing. We're moving into this time where the Lord makes a covenant promise, which covenant and promise are kind of redundant. And we've talked about when the Bible repeats itself like that, it's a doozy. Okay, so this is one heck of a promise that God is making to Abram.
Yeah.
So sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, "Do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great."
At this time, he's been hearing this for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been in this land for like ever. And in the ancient Jewish scriptures, extra biblical sources of Jewish scriptures say that Sarai and Abram believed that when they would enter the land of Canaan, they would be able to have children. They thought that the only reason they weren't having children is because they weren't living in the land of Canaan. And they've been in this land for like years and years, and it's like, kidding me? I still have an heir? I don't have any children. Where's that child you promised me?
Right. And so he said, "I'll protect you and your reward will be great." But Abram replied, "What good are all your blessings when I don't have the kid you said I was going to have?" He said, "Eleazar is a servant in my household, and he's going to inherit everything I have." And he kind of gets in God's face a little bit. And he says, "Eleazar is going to get everything that you've given me because you haven't given me a son." And I can hear the frustration in his voice. Then the Lord said to him, "No, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir." Then the Lord took Abram outside and said, "Look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you'll have." And the next sentence sets the tone for everything. "And Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith."
Before anything else, this is the crux of the entire story. It's the crux of the whole narrative. Anybody who's not Christian, you just hear that, and that's just a phrase.
Right.
But in the Christian world, that phrase is the crux of our whole faith. We believe Abram at this time, believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. It wasn't anything that he had to do to earn it. It wasn't anything that... It was before the circumcision. It was before the laws